Well, opposition MPs were hoping to continue their push today to call the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff before the Defence Committee to be questioned about the allegations of sexual misconduct against the former Chief of Defence Staff, Jonathan Vance. But the Liberal chair of the committee abruptly cancelled the meeting at the last minute. And on Tuesday, MPs will be debating a Conservative motion calling for the House to call for the Prime Minister to fire Katie Telford for failing to notify him of the allegations of sexual harassment against General Vance when they first surfaced from the former military ombudsman 3 years ago. So, lots to follow up on now with these latest developments. 3 members of Parliament. Anita Vandenbeld is the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Defence. Michael Barrett is the Ethics Critic for the official opposition Conservatives. And Randall Garrison is the Defence Critic for the NDP. Anita Vandenbeld, let me start with you. The Defence Committee was scheduled to meet today to continue debating whether to call Katie Telford as a witness. Why was the meeting cancelled at the last minute?
Well, first of all, the Defence Committee was scheduled actually to talk about our mental health study. And it was, in fact, the opposition on Friday that pushed to suspend the proceedings. And this morning, when it became apparent that Mr. O'Toole said that he was going to put a motion in the House to have the very person that we were debating calling before committee have a motion to have that person fired, at that point, nothing productive could come from a meeting because they'd already presupposed the outcome of the testimony. And I'd like to be clear that the Defence Committee is meeting again on Friday. I think the chair made that very apparent today.
Will this be on the agenda? Will Katie Telford's appearance be on the? I guess it depends what happens to the motion tomorrow. Huh?
Yeah, and I think there's a little bit of crying wolf here because a few weeks ago, the opposition were screaming that we shut down the study when in fact all we did was put a timeline on the report. And we've had 5 more meetings on this since we supposedly shut down the study.
All right, Mr. Barrett, what's your reaction to that, Mr. Barrett?
Well, it's clear this is part of a cover-up. We have a committee that's scheduled to meet, and because the Liberal members don't like what the opposition is going to talk about, they canceled the meeting. It's very clear the reason that opposition parties want to hear from Ms. Telford. The Prime Minister has said he didn't know about the allegations against General Vance, and we've heard that Ms. Telford did know. We heard from the Ombudsman that he informed the Minister Sajjan, directly that these were allegations of sexual misconduct. So if Ms. Telford knew, and if the Prime Minister is to be believed that he did not know, then what we have a situation here where the Minister of Defence and the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff orchestrated a cover-up and kept the Prime Minister of Canada in the dark.
To Anita Vandenbeld's point, if you want her fired, what's the point of bringing her before committee?
Well, we talk about presupposing outcomes here. Ms. Vandenbeld is presupposing the outcome of a vote in the House of Commons. Let's hear her testimony. Perhaps it would enlighten members of Parliament when this Opposition Day motion comes for a vote.
Right, but you weren't. I don't think there was ever a scenario where you were going to get Katie Telford at the committee before tomorrow's motion calling for her to be fired.
Well, the motion's not going to come for a vote when we immediately, and also we don't get to pick when these days are scheduled. It's not for the chair of the committee to cancel a meeting because she doesn't like what the opposition is going to talk about.
Mr. Okay, we'll come back to Mr. Barrett. Mr. Garrison, let me hear from you on this about the cancellation of that meeting today. What do you think happened here?
Well, if Ms. Telford wanted to appear, we'd have all been there with bells on this morning to hear her testimony. But instead, the chair canceled the meeting, and I think it's important to step back.
But she wasn't scheduled to appear today, right? The debate was going to continue on whether you could call her as a witness.
Well, all you had to do was do a quick call around and say, Katie Telford wants to appear, and all of us would have agreed to that. So let's not play silly games about what's happening in committee. What the Liberals are doing is stalling because they don't want to hear what Ms. Telford has to say. But what's most important here is that if we don't get to the bottom of why there was no action taken against General Vance, then there's no confidence that any reforms going forward will actually be taken seriously by either the survivors of sexual misconduct or the perpetrators. And so we have to know why General Vance was left in office 3 years after a very serious allegation of sexual misconduct. The Minister of Defence says I referred to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister says I didn't know. So somebody here is not telling the truth, I think is the most simple thing you can say.
Ms. Vandenbeld, if there's nothing to see here, if there's nothing to hide, why not have Katie Telford appear at your committee to tell everyone what happened, what she knows? Why not have her go there and then she can set the record straight or give her evidence and then we can all move from there?
Well, I would take exception to what my parliamentary colleagues have been saying about what was known. It's been very clear from all of the testimony. No need for further testimony, especially Mr. Marquez. The clerk of the Privy Council, the minister several times have all made it very clear that the nature and specifics of the allegations were not known.
Right, except that no, but to be clear, Mr. Marquez, the first time we heard that the Prime Minister's office might have known ahead of the Privy Council office was in Mr. Marquez's testimony, saying that Katie Telford was aware of it prior to Mr. Sajjan telling the Privy Council to.
I think we have to be very careful what the "it" is, because there was, as Mr. Marquez said, very limited knowledge of what it was. They didn't know the nature. They didn't know what the allegation was. There were no specifics known. But in fact, in 2015, it was Aaron O'Toole who did have rumors about very specific allegations, at least two, maybe three allegations.
Do you acknowledge the testimony? The testimony now puts Katie Telford in the loop.
I would say it's exact opposite, because we actually know now from every single person that testified that the nature of the allegations was not known.
No, but even if she didn't know the name, she was made aware of an allegation, and the Prime Minister says it was never brought to him. So she was aware there was something involving General Vance, and it was never brought up to the Prime Minister.
And I would also take exception, I should say, there was no action because they didn't know what the allegation was. Mr. Walburn never provided what the allegation was. So there was nothing to tell. There was nothing to know when you don't know what it is, you don't know who it is, you don't know the nature of it.
Mr. Barrett, let me ask you this. The House will debate a Conservative motion. We've talked about it, calling for the firing of Katie Telford. It's not binding on the Prime Minister, and I guess I'm wondering, what would firing Katie Telford accomplish for the victims of sexual misconduct in the military?
Well, first of all, let's be very clear. Ms. Vandenbeld is being disingenuous in her comments. The Ombudsman said very clearly, and he has reaffirmed this several times in media following his appearance at committee, that he informed Minister Sajjan directly that the allegations were about sexual misconduct perpetrated by the Chief of the Defence Staff. So that was crystal clear, and he gave that information to the Minister of National Defence. So that's important that we don't selectively listen to the testimony we heard from the former Ombudsman, Mr. Walburn.
So firing Katie Telford does what for the victims of sexual misconduct?
Well, what we have is a situation where the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, if the Prime Minister is to be believed that he didn't know, and we know that Ms. Telford did know, then she covered up allegations of sexual misconduct perpetrated by the Chief of Defence Staff against people under his command. And so there needs to be consequences. People need to see that there's been some action taken. We have a Prime Minister who's done nothing. He sat on the last review that was done for 6 years, and now in response to this, they're pointing and saying, "Oh my gosh, look, the Conservatives heard a rumor in 2015 and had an investigation."
Let me move to Mr. Garrison. Mr. Garrison, do you support the motion to fire Katie Telford?
Well, the Prime Minister himself pointed the finger at Katie Telford in his press conference. I just think it's unfortunate that the Conservatives took the bait. So no, we won't be supporting the motion to fire Ms. Telford, because the one responsible here, and there's only two choices, is the Minister of Defence or the Prime Minister. The Minister of Defence says, "I told the Prime Minister's office," and he clearly knew it was sexual misconduct. So that's where we have the breakdown here in our knowledge. If he told him it was sexual misconduct, and then the Prime Minister wasn't informed, the only one who can tell us that is Katie Telford. And that's why we'd still like to see her appear at committee.
Okay, about 30 seconds left here. Katie Telford did appear before the committee investigating the We Charity situation, Anita Vandenbeld. Why can't she appear at this committee and answer the questions?
Well, I'd just like to be clear that...
No, I'm just asking that question. Why can't she show up and why can't she tell the committee her side of the story?
First of all, that is up to the committee. I think that the fact is that everything we've heard in committee has been consistent. Minister Sajjan did say that he disagreed with parts of Mr. Walburn's testimony, and every other witness that we've had has held up the fact and has said again that there were no specifics known, and there's nothing new to learn. There's nothing new because nobody knew any specifics at that time. We're gonna
stop. We're gonna leave. We're gonna leave it at that. We're out of time for tonight. But thank you all for giving us your information. We're continuing to follow where this goes, and we'll follow the motion in the House as well tomorrow. Thank you all for your time tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you.